Illusionist, I have a question for you. There is another topic that I want to ask you about. Since 2017, I have been living in different and various European countries and regions. I have changed several countries. I have changed a lot of apartments, different regions, different neighborhoods. And in these 7 years of living in Europe, there has never been a single power outage or electricity disruption in any of my apartments. The power supply has been absolutely incredibly reliable. And during these 7 years, I even witnessed various severe disasters here, like floods, hurricanes, thunderstorms, and heavy rains, and other natural calamities, and the power never went out in this region. In my ancestral village, even if we don't consider the whole of Chechnya, in your ancestral village of Starye Atagi, which is also very dear to me since my mother is from this village, where I spent many memorable summers, the electricity is cut off several times a week. This place, which has a historical significance to my family, is deeply cherished by us. Power outages, in general, are somehow the norm for the entire Chechen Republic, affecting daily life and causing disruptions in various services. For Chechens, power outages were the norm in the 2000s, especially in the early 2000s, when Russia had just occupied us. There were checkpoints throughout the entire region. Everything was completely destroyed, and all those transformers were completely destroyed. And back in those days, there were even various types of entrepreneurs, business guys, businessmen, and other business professionals who, for instance, would buy a large, powerful diesel generator, install it in a suitable location, and for a small daily fee, they would allow you to connect your wire to it. You literally ran the wire to them through the trees, along the poles, brought it to your apartment, and plugged it into the socket. If you managed to come to an agreement with other residents, you could generally power your house. They supplied the market there. There was a time in the past. Even in places where there was electricity, it was frequently and occasionally unpredictably being turned off. In general, people had to be prepared for such outages. People bought diesel generators for themselves or made arrangements with those guys. That's how we lived in 2000. 24 years have passed. All this time we have had the Kadyrov's rule, a bright era if you ask them. First the father, indeed the savior of the people, and after him, his son. Truly. In your well-considered opinion, they very skillfully and adeptly managed the complex and multifaceted republic. And now, 24 years later, the WHO is still there. It seems like all the transformers have been repaired. All the power grids, if we ask you, you will surely tell us about the kilometers and kilometers, hundreds of kilometers of cables that have been replaced. That all these electrical infrastructures in the Republic are just top-notch. Huge amounts of money and effort have been spent on this. You will surely tell us about it. But for some reason, the power in Chechen homes still goes out, despite significant, substantial, and considerable investments. People sit and wait. Something happens, it's understandable. People here are understanding something happened, that's all. But even without all that, we somehow, in some inexplicable way, have these constant, never-ending power outages. How many more years of this bright rule of Kadyrov do we need for the issue of power outages in Chechen homes to be resolved, to ensure that power outages finally become a thing of the past, so that there are no more outages, and residents can enjoy a stable and reliable power supply to reach the level of European countries where people don't know what a power outage is? How many more years do we need? The issue of water supply. In those same 2000s, even if water was available somewhere, interruptions were constant. It stopped. Pressure was insufficient for higher floors. It didn't reach the 5th floor. Second floor people filled buckets and carried them up, and in some places there was no water at all. People went with buckets. That's how we lived in 2000. For the past 24 years, the Kadyrovs have ruled with what they call enlightened governance. Despite this, we continue to experience frequent and frustrating disruptions in our water supply. In the 7 years I've lived in Europe, I have never, absolutely never experienced a water outage here. Only if you don't pay, they'll actually cut you off. As for having your water disconnected or interrupted, I've never experienced that, in fact. Although I admit that maybe somewhere, if some work is being done, they will notify in advance, write about it, and if they turn it off, it will be for a maximum of a few hours. But the constant water outages, where people are forced to go without water for days, even weeks, in a supposedly thriving republic where all the water supply pipes have surely been replaced. If you tell us that everything in this area has been done, all the work completed, everything reconstructed, yet water interruptions in Chechen homes continue, which is quite surprising given the current state of affairs in this modern age, despite assurances from authorities. Please respond to us in your next video, explaining in detail how many more years you need, as well as how many additional years Kadyrov will require to rule, for the problems with the uninterrupted electricity supply and consistent water supply to Chechen homes to finally be resolved. This clarification will help us understand the expected timeline for these critical issues.